At my own wedding, the room froze when my mother-in-law stood up and said, "From today on, you'll hand over your entire $8,500 salary and every bonus to our family. If you refuse, walk out right now." The microphone slipped from my hand. I looked at my wife. She didn't move, didn't speak, just stood beside her mother. The music stopped, eyes turned, and for the first time in my life, I realized silence could sound like betrayal. I straightened my suit jacket, took one breath, and walked out of the venue, leaving behind the woman I thought I knew. A few hours later, my phone rang, and that call changed everything. But before I share my story with you, I'd love to know you're here with me. Drop a simple hi in the comments so I know you're listening, or tell me where you're watching from. I love to see how far my story can reach. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. My name is Lachlan Vane, and this is not just a story about a ruined wedding. It's about how losing everything at the altar became the first moment I truly stood up for myself. If you believe every story deserves to be heard, please subscribe. It helps more than you know. The snow outside fell in quiet flakes, the kind that muffled the world and made every sound inside sharper. The jazz band faded as the MC handed me the microphone. I smiled, ready to thank our guests, ready to seal a new chapter of my life with grace. But before I could say a word, Rowena Wynn, my mother-in-law, rose from her chair, crystal glass in hand. Her voice cut through the music like a blade. "From today on," she said, "every syllable clear, you will hand over your entire $8,500 salary and every bonus to our family trust. If you refuse, you can walk out of this wedding right now." For a second, I thought I misheard her. The air grew heavy, the chandeliers trembling slightly from the silence. I turned toward Alessia, my wife. Her hand rested lightly on her mother's shoulder, her eyes on the floor. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She didn't stop it. I looked around. Some guests whispered behind their napkins. Others pulled out their phones, pretending to text while recording. The photographer lowered his camera, unsure whether to keep shooting. The microphone felt heavier in my palm. For years, I'd worked on construction sites across Colorado, building bridges, highways, and overpasses that carried people toward their dreams. I'd built everything with my hands, but in that moment, standing there in a designer suit beneath golden lights, I realized the only thing I couldn't build was respect from a family that measured worth in control. "Rowena," I said evenly, "you've made yourself clear." Then I placed the microphone back into the MC's trembling hand. I adjusted my tie, straightened my suit jacket, and looked at my father sitting at the back. His calm eyes told me everything. We'd had this talk before. He'd told me, "If someone ever grabs the mic from you, son, you have the right to walk away." So I did. As I crossed the aisle, the sound of murmurs followed me like an echo. I passed Rowena, who looked pleased with her power, and Alessia, who looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. When my hand touched the glass door, I caught my reflection. The fabric of my suit lay smooth against my chest, not a single crease. For the first time, I didn't see a man running from shame. I saw a man walking toward freedom. A server near the door whispered as I passed, "People are filming this. It's going viral." His words didn't sting. They only confirmed what I already knew. Truth travels faster than secrets. Outside, snow dusted the parking lot. My truck sat by the side entrance, and in its back seat, a small overnight bag waited packed 2 days earlier just in case. I'd hoped I'd never need it. I was wrong. My father joined me without a word. We stood under the awning, watching the lights of Boulder blur behind the snowfall. Inside, applause stuttered confused, then died out completely. I could still hear Rowena's voice echoing faintly through the glass. "He'll come back. They always do." She was wrong. As we pulled away, the tires crunched over the frozen ground. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was a kind of understanding only built through years of surviving storms together. My father finally spoke, eyes fixed on the road. "Proud of you, son." "Thanks," I said quietly. My hands gripped the steering wheel steady. "For once, I think I am too." Hours later, back in the dim light of a motel off Route 36, my phone buzzed against the nightstand. Unknown number. I stared at the screen, the snow still falling outside. I didn't answer yet. Whoever it was that call would decide what came next. Months before that wedding, I'd sat at a dining table long enough to seat 20, surrounded by chandeliers and the quiet hum of wealth. The first time I visited the Wynn estate in Highlands Ranch, I was more nervous than I cared to admit. Alessia squeezed my hand as we stepped through the carved mahogany doors, but even her touch couldn't settle the knot in my chest. The walls were lined with portraits of ancestors who all looked like they'd never known a day of uncertainty. The air smelled faintly of polished oak and power. Dinner began with small talk about Denver's skyline and the upcoming real estate conference. Then Malcolm Wynn, Alessia's father, folded his napkin neatly and leaned forward. Marriage, he said, is a partnership. But like any partnership, it works best when one person leads. Rowena smiled, that tight managerial smile. We have a family system, Lachlan. A tradition. Every income that enters this family goes through one account. It's how we maintain stability. She took a sip of wine, eyes sharp. May I ask your salary? I blinked. You may, I said. But I might not answer. Malcolm chuckled, but there was no humor in it. He's got spirit. Rowena didn't laugh. It's important to be transparent. Alessia's finances are part of the Wynn portfolio. We can't have loose ends. Alessia's fingers tightened around her fork. Mom, maybe now isn't. Rowena cut her off. We're just having an honest conversation. Lachlan, how much do you make? I met her eyes. Enough to live. Enough to save. Enough to never owe anyone in this room. For a moment, the clinking of cutlery filled the silence. Gareth, Alessia's younger brother, leaned back with a smirk. The family trust keeps everyone safe, he said. When the tide gets rough, that fund bails people out. It's kind of a safety net. Rowena's look warned him to stop talking, but it was too late. The way Alessia's gaze darted toward him told me more than words. Someone had already been bailed out. I glanced down as Gareth bent to pick up a folder that had slipped from his briefcase. A few papers fanned out across the floor: casino logos, loan numbers, red stamps, gambling debts. He snatched them up quickly, eyes flashing with embarrassment. Alessia saw it too, and for a second her mask slipped. Then she pretended not to notice. Dinner continued like nothing had happened, but the taste of the steak turned metallic. Rowena moved on to responsibility, to image, to protecting the Wynn name. She said love without management was chaos, and I thought of my father fixing a broken hinge with one hand and holding my childhood together with the other. No management, no contracts, just grit. When dessert arrived, Alessia reached under the table, squeezed my hand, and whispered, "Please don't fight her. She only wants to protect us." I whispered back, "If safety means giving her control over our lives, then who's protecting who?" After dinner, I stepped outside onto the terrace. The Denver skyline glittered in the distance. Inside, laughter drifted from the dining room, polite and hollow. Alessia joined me, coat over her shoulders. "You embarrassed her," she said softly. "She asked for my paycheck before asking about my dreams," I replied. "She just wants to know you'll take care of me." "I thought that's what love was supposed to prove," I said. "Not paperwork." We stood there, the wind cold enough to sting. A long silence stretched between us until she finally whispered, "Please don't make me choose." I didn't answer, but in my mind I already knew that if the day came when she had to, she wouldn't choose me. That night, as we drove back to Denver, her message appeared on my phone. "Don't provoke her again. She's just trying to keep peace. Please." I stared at the screen, the reflection of the city lights flickering across it, and thought to myself, if peace costs your dignity, whose peace is it really? That question lingered with me all the way to the wedding day, where the answer finally revealed itself. The air in my father's workshop always smelled like cedar and sawdust, the scent of things built to last. Outside, Evergreen was still half covered in snow, the pine trees bending slightly under its weight. Inside, warm light from the filament bulbs flickered across his workbench, catching the dust that floated in slow motion. My father was planing a board when I arrived, sleeves rolled up, the rhythm of the tools steady and sure like a heartbeat. I told him about the dinner at the Wynn estate, the questions about my salary, the condescension that came with every smile, and the way Alessia stayed quiet through it all. He didn't interrupt once, just kept shaping the edge of the board until I finished. Then he said, "You don't need to sign anything that makes you feel small, son. Paper doesn't prove love. How you show up every day does." I watched his hands as he fitted two joints together. The first didn't align perfectly. He tapped it with his chisel, adjusted the pressure, and said softly, "Wood bends and you fix it with patience. But people, when they bend wrong, you can't hammer them straight. You let them carry their own weight until they learn balance." He reached up to a shelf, pulled down an old hammer, its wooden handle worn smooth from years of use. "This one's been with me since before you were born," he said, handing it to me. "When someone tries to take away your microphone, remember you still have this." The hammer was heavy, solid, real. It wasn't just a tool. It was a reminder of everything I'd been taught: earn your keep your word, and never let anyone else decide your worth. I ran my thumb over the initials carved faintly on the handle: EV. His name, Eamon Vane. He smiled when he saw me notice. "That's a reminder, not a brand," he said. "Use it when you have to, not to break, but to build." I wanted to believe I could still build something good with Alessia, even if her mother's world felt like a cage of contracts. But that dinner had planted a seed of doubt. I loved her truly. The way she laughed when her guard was down, the way she'd curl against my shoulder on long drives, the way she dreamed of a life that wasn't all marble floors and polished optics. Yet she carried her mother's shadow like it was stitched into her skin. That night, while I helped my father sand the frame for our wedding photo, he told me stories of my mother, how she'd never cared about the size of his paycheck, only the honesty of his work. She said, "The world doesn't owe you comfort, but it owes you the chance to stand tall," he said, tightening a bolt on the workbench. That's all a good life is. Later, as we closed up, his phone rang, a number from Denver's Port Association. He listened, nodded once, and hung up. "Old friend," he murmured, wiping his hands on a rag. "Says there's a man named Damon Graves investing in infrastructure downtown. Different kind of investor, apparently. One who cares more about character than credit scores." He didn't say more, but something in his tone lingered with me like a spark I couldn't place. Before I left, he packed the hammer in a small cloth wrap and placed it in my hands. "If the world ever tries to take something that's yours, Lachlan, use your words first. But if they try to take your dignity, walk away and carry this instead." I nodded, throat tight. On my way out, I saw the unfinished frame for our wedding photo resting on his bench corners, still unjoined, waiting for glue and nails that might never come. Snow started falling again, soft and deliberate. I put the hammer beside me in the truck and whispered, "I'll keep it safe, keep it." That night, as I drove back toward Denver, I kept thinking about his last words before I left: "Hold the hammer, if you must, son, and be ready to walk." I tightened my grip on the wheel and asked myself, would I really have the courage to do it if that day came? 2 weeks before the ceremony, everything about our wedding stopped feeling like ours. The Wynn family had taken over the plans like they were drafting a corporate merger. Guest lists, floral contracts, even the playlist, every decision passed through Rowena's approval. She called it efficiency. I called it ownership. I spent my days out at the site, overseeing a bridge repair outside Denver, coming home covered in dust while Alessia's world was buried in seating charts and dress fittings. She tried to smile through the exhaustion, but I could tell she was being pulled between us, between the life she wanted and the one she'd been raised to obey. One evening, I stopped by the venue after work, still in my safety vest, to check the setup. I found Rowena there, clipboard in hand, rearranging the florist's designs. "Mr. Vane," she said without looking up, "we pride ourselves on tasteful events. The Wynn name has a certain standard." "I thought it was our wedding," I said. She finally looked at me, her eyes sharp beneath flawless makeup. "We're investing in your future image, Lachlan. Presentation matters." Later that night, I reviewed the invoice list she'd sent Alessia for approval. The deposit for the venue, $20,000, hadn't come from her personal account, but from Wynn Estates, her company, with a note at the bottom: investment in family image. I mentioned it to Alessia, and she tried to explain it away. She just wants the wedding to reflect who we are. Who we are or who she wants us to be, I asked. Her voice trembled. She's proud. She wants people to see we belong. I don't need her money to belong, I said. I don't want to owe her anything. That night she cried, shoulders shaking under the soft light of our living room. If you keep pushing her, she won't come to the ceremony, she said. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her until she stopped trembling, but inside something cracked. For the first time, I realized love wasn't always enough to bridge two worlds. A few days later, I came home early and caught a conversation through the kitchen speakerphone. Rowena's voice was sharp and low. Once he starts transferring his paycheck, Gareth will have the liquidity to smooth over your numbers. The wedding will silence the rumors. Just make sure he signs the paperwork afterward. My chest tightened. I stepped back quietly, hit record on my phone, and captured the rest of her words. She ended with a laugh that didn't sound like relief, more like victory. That night, an email arrived from Gareth meant for someone else. Attached was a spreadsheet labeled Family Trust Projections. I opened it and froze when I saw my name, L. Vane, $8,500 monthly contribution bonuses included. I forwarded it to my private account and said nothing. When I confronted Alessia later asking to delay the wedding until we cleared the air, she looked at me like I'd asked her to betray her own blood. You don't understand her, she said. My father cheated years ago. She lost everything, her home, her trust. Controlling money makes her feel safe. I get that, I said. But safety built on control isn't safety. It's fear with better lighting. She just doesn't want to lose anyone else, she whispered. And by protecting everyone, I said quietly, she's losing you. She turned away, tears falling silently. I wanted to reach for her, but every time I tried, she took another step back. That's when I knew the distance between us wasn't measured in feet. It was measured in loyalty. That night, I drove back to Evergreen. My father was still in the shop, sanding the same frame, slow and steady. He looked up when he saw me. You ready, son? I hesitated, then said, I don't know. But if I have to choose between peace and pride, I'll take pride. At least that's mine. He nodded, once eyes steady. Then you already made your choice. I looked at the hammer resting on his bench, its wooden handle catching the light. For the first time, I understood it wasn't a weapon, it was a promise. And soon I'd need to keep it. The morning of the wedding broke cold and bright, a thin veil of snow resting on the rooftops of Boulder. I remember thinking how clean everything looked, like the world had been reset overnight. The historic hall shimmered under the chandeliers, brass light catching on every crystal. 200 guests filled the room, most of them Rowena's clients, investors, and people who spoke in polished tones about market trends and legacy portfolios. I tried to ignore the gnawing tension beneath my ribs. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Alessia looked beautiful, almost unreal. She smiled for photos, clutched my hand during the vows, and whispered, "We made it." For a fleeting second, I believed her. Maybe we really had survived the storm. Maybe love could soften the sharp edges of her family's world. But the hope didn't last long. The reception was in full swing when Rowena rose from her seat near the head table. She carried her glass with the precision of someone used to commanding attention. The jazz band faded and the room fell quiet as she approached the stage. The MC, thinking she wanted to toast, handed her the microphone. Her voice rang out smooth and unshakable. As the matriarch of the Wynn family, I'd like to make a small announcement, she began. From today forward, as tradition dictates, my new son-in-law will contribute his entire salary, $8,500 a month, plus all bonuses, to the Wynn Family Fund. It ensures stability, harmony, and trust. The silence was absolute. Forks hovered in mid-air. Someone gasped. A few phones tilted up, recording. Alessia froze beside me, eyes wide, lips pressed tight. Gareth smirked at his glass of champagne. Malcolm raised his own, nodding approvingly. I could feel the pulse in my neck hammering. For a moment I thought Rowena was joking, but the proud lift of her chin told me she wasn't. If you disagree, she added, you may walk out. The Wynn family doesn't force anyone to stay, but we also don't welcome those who refuse to follow our ways. The air turned heavy. I looked at Alessia again, pleading for her to say something, anything. But she didn't move. She stood beside her mother still, and silent, her diamond earrings glinting like cold stars. Someone near the bar whispered, "This is humiliation." Another voice said, "He should leave." My father sat in the back, hands folded, jaw clenched. I knew what he was thinking, and I knew he wouldn't stop me. I took the microphone from its stand. My voice came out steady. "Thank you for making things clear, Mrs. Wynne." Then I set it down gently on the table. I adjusted my jacket, the fabric smooth beneath my fingers, and turned toward the doors. My father rose at the same moment, falling into step behind me. People shifted aside as we walked down the aisle. Some clapped awkwardly, thinking it was part of the ceremony. Others whispered, phones still raised. Rowena's voice followed us, sharp and furious. "Don't think walking away makes you free, Lachlan. You'll regret this." Before I pushed open the doors, I heard another voice, low, almost amused, from somewhere near her table. "Careful, Rowena," the man said. "I'm recording this whole thing." I didn't know who he was then, but his words stayed with me. Outside, the cold hit like a breath of truth. Snowflakes melted against my collar as we walked to my truck. I opened the door, slid the hammer my father had given me beneath the seat, and started the engine. The headlights cut through the falling snow as we pulled away. Neither of us spoke for miles. The radio stayed off the road ahead, winding through darkness. Finally, my father said quietly, "The microphone stayed behind, but your voice didn't." I nodded, gripping the wheel tighter. Somewhere behind us in that glowing hall, Rowena was probably already rewriting the story, turning my silence into rebellion, my dignity into weakness. But out here on this frozen road, it felt like freedom. When we reached the edge of town, my phone buzzed on the console. The screen flashed private number. I stared at it, heartbeat steady but heavy. Whoever it was, that call would decide whether this night ended in ruin or revelation. The motel room was small and warm, the air thick with the scent of old carpet and coffee gone cold. My father was asleep in the chair by the window boots, still on his coat draped over him like a blanket. Outside, trucks rumbled down Route 36, their headlights slicing through the snow. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, waiting for it to ring again. It didn't take long. The first call came just after midnight. Alessia. Her voice was trembling. "You humiliated my mother," she said through tears. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I didn't humiliate her," I said evenly. "She did that to herself. In front of everyone." "She's devastated," she whispered. "The press is already talking. Please just come back, explain. Tell them it was a misunderstanding, make it stop. No one loses face for telling the truth, Alessia. Only for living a lie." There was a pause, then a soft sob, and the line went dead. An hour later, the phone rang again. Rowena. Her tone was icy, her composure back in place. "You've destroyed my image, Mr. Vane. I will see to it you never work in Denver again." "I don't live on image," I said. "I live on work. Something you wouldn't understand." She hissed something under her breath before hanging up. I set the phone down, exhaled, and let the silence fill the room. The third call came just before dawn. The number was unfamiliar. A low, calm voice spoke. "Mr. Vane. My name is Damon Graves. I'm the lead investor behind the Riverline project. I saw the video from your wedding." I froze. "Why are you calling me?" "Because Mrs. Wynne called me last night begging for help managing the fallout. I told her I'd only meet if you were in the room." I frowned. "And why would you want me there?" "Because I know what kind of man you are," he said. "And I know what kind she is. Meet me at the Wynne Estates office at 9. You'll want to hear what comes next." Before I could respond, the line went dead. I opened my laptop out of instinct. The video was already everywhere. Someone had posted it under the headline, "CEO Forces Son-in-Law to Hand Over $8,500 Salary at Wedding." It had over 1 million views. The comments split in two, some laughing at me, others furious at her. The tag, "Marn Salary Bride," was trending across social media. The empire she'd built on reputation was starting to crack. My inbox pinged. A new message from an address I didn't recognize. There was no subject, only a single attachment, a short video clip. I hesitated, then opened it. The footage was grainy shot on a phone. It showed Rowena and Gareth after the reception. Her voice was unmistakable. "Don't worry," she said. "We'll spin this. We'll tell people he's unstable, that he panicked under pressure." I saved the clip to my drive and stared at the screen until the image blurred. My father stirred in his chair. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Better than I thought," I said. "Worse for them." He rubbed his eyes, then leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Damon Graves," he said slowly. "That name sound familiar to you?" I shook my head. "Your mother once helped a young man named Damon when he was starting out, gave him a place to stay after a storm hit the port. He promised one day he'd repay that kindness. Seems like he's finally found a way." I looked out the window. Snow was still falling thick now, covering the roads and the silence. The glow of the motel sign flickered red across the windshield of my truck outside. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from Alessia. "They're calling an emergency meeting. Mom's losing control." I didn't respond. I sat there staring at the hammer resting on the nightstand, the initials still carved into its handle. My father stood stretched and placed his hand on my shoulder. "You going?" "Yes," I said. "But not to save them. To save what's right." He smiled faintly, pride soft in his eyes. "That's the Vane way." As the first light of morning broke through the storm, I grabbed my coat and the hammer, slipped it into my bag and stepped outside. The snow crunched beneath my boots, the world quiet except for the hum of distant traffic. Ahead of me, Denver waited cold, sharp and alive with reckoning. The snowstorm had ended overnight, leaving Denver washed clean and quiet beneath a silver morning light. From the 40th floor of Wynn Estates, the city stretched out like a map bridges I'd helped build, glimmering faintly through the mist. The boardroom was all glass and steel, the kind of place where silence carried weight. Rowena sat at the head of the table beside Malcolm, her pearl earrings catching the light. Alessia sat slightly behind them, hands clasped tightly, while Gareth fidgeted with his cufflinks, pretending not to be afraid. Across from them sat my father, Eamon Vane, his calloused hands folded calmly, and Damon Graves, the man who had called me at dawn. I took the last chair beside him. Damon's tone was calm but cutting. "Thank you all for coming. We're here to talk about two things, honor and consequence." Rowena forced a smile. "This has gone too far, Damon. That video was taken out of context. The press has twisted it to create a spectacle. You know how these things go." I leaned forward, my voice steady. "The truth doesn't need twisting. It only needs to be heard." Her eyes met mine defiant, then flicked toward Alessia as if expecting backup. But Alessia stared at her lap, silent. Damon pressed a button on the table. The large monitor on the wall lit up. For a moment, only static filled the screen. Then the video began. There we were. Rowena standing tall, champagne glass in hand, Alessia beside her, me frozen mid-breath as her words filled the speakers. "From today on, you will hand over your entire salary." The room grew colder. No one spoke. Then came the second clip, the one I'd received anonymously, the footage of Rowena and Gareth after the ceremony. Her voice, unmistakable. "We'll say he panicked. Tell everyone he's unstable." Gareth's hand trembled against the table. Alessia's face went pale. Rowena's composure cracked. "That's not real," she said quickly. "Someone edited that." "It's your voice," Damon said flatly. "Your words. And this," he gestured to me, "is the man you humiliated in front of hundreds of witnesses." Malcolm shifted in his seat, his temper rising. "You have no right to parade our family in public like this. You think walking away makes you a saint?" Damon didn't even look at him. "No, Mr. Wynn. It makes him a man who still remembers what dignity feels like." Rowena's eyes darted around the room, searching for control she no longer had. "You can't destroy my company over this," she said. "Damon, please, this is business. You understand reputational risk better than anyone." He turned the monitor off, his voice quiet but sharp. What I understand is that Wynn Estates has been built on control and deceit. You've used people, your husband, your children, even your son-in-law, as leverage to protect your image. But the foundation is already cracked. He glanced at me. Do you have anything else to add? Lachlan, I took out my phone and pressed play. From the speaker came Rowena's voice, calm and calculating. Once he signs, the debt is covered. We'll be fine. The recording filled the room like smoke. Gareth's face drained of color. Alessia's breath caught. Rowena's hand flew to her mouth. Malcolm slammed his palm against the table. You're exploiting private conversations. Damon's gaze turned icy. I'm exposing abuse. There's a difference. He straightened his tie. As of this morning, my firm has withdrawn all investment from Wynn Estates. The markets will do the rest. Rowena's poise finally crumbled. She sank into her chair, whispering, You can't. Damon, please, you can't. He looked at her with something almost like pity. I can, and I will. Because a woman once taught me that respect isn't given, it's earned. That woman was your husband's wife, Mr. Vane's mother. She helped me when I had nothing. Today I return the favor to her son. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Alessia began to cry softly. Mom, she said through tears, how did it come to this? Rowena turned toward her, her voice shaking. Because you let him make me lose control. I met her eyes. No one makes anyone lose control, Mrs. Wynn. People just decide what matters more, their power or their love. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. I placed the microphone at the center of the table and said, I didn't come here for revenge. I came so the truth could stand on its own feet. I'll leave with nothing owed and nothing hidden. Damon nodded once. That's the only kind of victory worth keeping. I turned to leave. My father rose quietly, following me to the door. Behind us, the sound of phones ringing filled the room, alerts, messages, panic. The financial news networks had already begun their descent. Wynn Estates' stock was collapsing live. As we stepped into the hallway, I looked back through the glass. Rowena sat motionless, her empire disintegrating in real time. I thought of what my father once told me. No empire collapses from the outside, it rots from the foundation up. And hers had been crumbling for years. The elevator doors opened and the city below glowed gold under the thawing snow. I didn't look back again. 6 months later, spring had come to Evergreen. The snow was gone, replaced by the scent of pine and fresh sawdust. My father's workshop had grown into a small construction company, Vane Timberworks, specializing in cedar bridges for mountain resorts. I managed the operations. He oversaw the craft. Some mornings I still woke before dawn, out of habit, brewed coffee and stepped outside to feel the air. It carried the same quiet peace I'd been chasing for years. The newspapers had moved on to other scandals, but every now and then, a headline would remind me of what had happened. Rowena Wynn steps down after financial scandal. Wynn Estates faces investigation for misuse of funds. Malcolm Wynn had retreated to their country home, refusing interviews. Gareth was under investigation for embezzlement. Alessia had left Denver altogether. One afternoon, a letter arrived in her handwriting. Lachlan, it began, I finally understand. Love built on silence can't stand. I stayed quiet because I thought peace meant surrender. I see now that silence can wound deeper than words. I hope you find someone who speaks beside you, not around you. I folded the letter carefully and set it in the drawer of my desk. I didn't hate her. In a way, we had both been trapped in the same cage, hers just looked prettier. A week later, Damon Graves arrived unannounced. He stepped into the workshop, running a hand over the smooth beam of cedar my father had just finished. You've built something remarkable here, he said. I'd like to invest not in the business, but in your way of doing things. Integrity travels further than money these days. He proposed a partnership bridges for mountain towns across the western states. I agreed, not out of ambition, but because I wanted to build things that lasted, not things that impressed. Before leaving, he paused by the door. By the way, he said with a small smile, I was the one who sent you that video. The one that exposed her conversation after the wedding. I wasn't surprised. Why? He shrugged. You already had the truth. I just opened the door. You're the one who walked through it. When he left, I went back to the bridge. We were finishing a curved cedar span over a clear lake. We called it the Rook Bridge, after my mother. The day of its dedication, the entire town showed up. Kids ran across it, their laughter echoing over the water. I held the hammer my father had given me months ago and drove the final nail into place. The sound was sharp, clean, certain. As I stepped back, I saw a figure standing at the far edge of the bridge. Alessia. She didn't come closer, just lifted a hand in quiet acknowledgement. I nodded back. No anger, no regret. Just an ending that finally felt right. Later that evening, I walked alone across the bridge. The cedar glowed under the setting sun, the air carrying the scent of wood and rain. My father stood at the far end watching. Your mother would have been proud, he said. I smiled. She always said bridges last longer than walls. He laughed softly. She was right. When he left, I stayed behind, leaning against the railing. The lake reflected the sky in perfect symmetry, no distortion, no storm. I ran a hand over the engraved bronze plaque set into the wood, built by hands, not by control. The hammer rested beside me, worn but solid, a reminder of everything I'd learned. I'd walked out of a wedding with nothing but my name, and somehow that had been enough. As the wind rose across the water, I whispered to myself, dignity isn't something anyone can take from you. You lose it only when you give it away. The sun dipped behind the mountains, and for the first time in a long while I felt weightless. Every sound, the rustle of trees, the soft creak of the bridge beneath my boots felt like a heartbeat. My own. The steady rhythm of a man who had finally built something no one could ever own.